Hi, as I said, I'm Tomas Rawlings, actually coming up here after Baroness Kidron's fascinating talk, and she introduced us to gamer nappies, and fortunately, Baroness O'Neill's also fascinating talk introduced us to the concept that vulnerability creates trust. So here we go, I'm a gamer, and I'm not wearing any gamer nappies, I have to say. They're a new one to me. But I'm also not alone. One of the stats that I found really interesting is 17% of over 50-year-olds play games at least once a month. And obviously, if you go into a younger age group, that rises rapidly. So 8 to 11-year-olds, they're playing roughly 68% every day. So it's about a third of the UK population we can categorize as gamers, in that they play games with a fairly regular or very regular, or if you're wearing pants, a very, very regular basis. So games have a perception issue, which is that we see games equal fun, and therefore fun things aren't serious. So if you're a gamer and you play games, if you make games, you're kind of out of the serious conversations. You're just the entertainment. It's just the humor bit. It's the fun. There's nothing serious going on there. But actually, I think for those of us who play games and those of us who make games, games form a primary medium. And if you think about how you understand the world around you, most of us don't experience things we hear about in other parts of the world firsthand. We rely on second-hand accounts. So film, novels, books, TV. These form our primary mediums about how we build a mental model of the world. And for those of us who are gamers, games are our primary medium. And the problem is that there is a serious set of conversations going on. And in that room, there are poets, and there are journalists, and there are lawmakers, and there are filmmakers, and essayists, and writers. And they're all having a serious conversation. And those of us who are gamers and game designers, we're not allowed in. We are told that we don't understand what you do because we don't understand the way you say it, therefore stay out. And I think that misses something really important. Firstly, games have a lot to bring to the conversation. As a non-linear medium, we can do things that other mediums can't do. And in addition to that, in the world of gaming, a lot of the debates, some of which we've been hearing today, about freedom, about control, and about data are being played out right now, and I think we can learn from those. So this is a game, an MMO, massively multiplayer online game called Ultima Online. It was originally founded in 1997, all that long ago, if any of you remember that far back. And it's a really fascinating game. It's a Tolkien-esque game of orcs and wizards and goblins, that sort of stuff. In the early days of the game, the people playing it, they pay a subscription fee, and they were having problems with the game, and so they got unhappy that they didn't feel they were getting the service they deserved. So what did they do? They organized. They went to protest. And this is one of the protests in Ultima Online. They chose a color-themed protest, although extra points if you can spot the naked guy in the protest, because he's there. They organized a protest to say, we're not happy with it, and we're going to make our feelings known. Now, what's interesting about that to me is that, for something that's just fun and frivolous and throwaway, people are taking it very seriously, and they're organizing very seriously. But it didn't just end in protest. This is a screenshot of, and the central guy on the balcony is Lord British, and he is the designer of the game, and he went on a royal tour of the world. It was actually a stress test so that they could put lots of groups of people together to see if the servers handled it. And as he was wandering around delivering proclamations, unbeknownst to him at this point, there's a character in the audience who pickpockets a fire spell from somebody else and decides to cast it, and bang, manages to kill Lord British. So there we have a political assassination going on. So that cloak, you can see, is the remains of Lord British, who forgot to set his invulnerability flag when he went into the world, and hence got killed. Now, Reigns said he did this because he was a member of a guild called the Ravens of Fate, and he did it because although he felt Lord British, wanted the best for the world, he was still a tyrant. He still had tyrannical power, and he felt that was wrong, and they wanted to act against that. So it's not the only place where you've seen this sort of thing happening. This is Second Life, another well-known arena. In Second Life, they had an inflationary problem. Again, this is a made-up world where we can make all the rules, where the data set of the game designers are absolute, but it's not. Problems still arise, and human nature becomes messy. And no matter how good the system's designed, these issues always come around, and the gamers game those systems. So the inflationary problem hit. What did they do? They imposed a tax. The tax on every object in the game, every game transaction. And people within the game world kicked against that. They took slogans and ideas from the original US Tea Party, and they demanded, if you're going to tax us, we want representation. That protest actually fizzled out and became a bit of a funny thing and didn't really go anywhere. But there is a set of protests that I think are much more interesting. So I'm going to skip over a few others that would have been nice to cover if we'd had time. The naked gnome protests of World of Warcraft are fascinating. Google them. And there's anti-McDonald's protests in Sims. There's a whole range of political ones. Interestingly, in Second Life, what you found was the resurgent Tea Party movement in 2009 actually staging virtual protests against a real-world government. So these boundaries cross over quite a lot. And I found interesting in looking at this, there's a professor of law, James Grimmelman, and he said, where online democracy doesn't exist, it may be necessary to invent it, which is exactly where we end up with the game EVE Online. Now, EVE Online is a space set game. It's a huge space opera, spaceships flying around. It's a really, really good game, very enjoyable to play, quite a complicated game, and the people playing it really like it, and they put a lot into it. Now, there was an early worry that within this game world, the creators of the game were going to introduce paid items that would affect the gameplay balance within it, and that effectively whoever could pay the most would do the best of the game. That was a problem, and it erupted into a huge set of protests, which we're about to see. So this is a YouTube clip from a guy called Blue Angel Heaven, and this is him heading into the protest. This is what a protest looks like when we all have the right to bear spaceships. That slowdown you're seeing now, that's the server trying to get so many people going to the same place, and bang, the protest.
What did I say?
Oh my God.
So what did the creators of EVE Online do? They did something I think really, really interesting, is that they realized there's no taxation without representation. And so they set about creating this, the Council of Stellar Management. And so these are elected representatives of the gaming community who meet with the creators of the game in order to give the grievances of the game world to those who create it. They recognize that you can't just impose a world on people, that the messiness of human nature needs to be represented. And this was their method they chose to do it. And it doesn't just end there. In their recent Fan Fest, for example, they had talks about the game and how that worked and new exciting products and all that sort of thing. But they also had talks by scientists, by space pioneers, by people who are pushing the current line of where space technology may be in the future. So they're blending the real world and the game world, those shared interests across it. And I think that's a really fascinating way that these two cross over. And it's certainly an area I spend a lot of my time as a games designer looking at. I am really interested in bringing the real world into the game world and the game world into the real world. So what does all this mean? EVE Online is a complicated game like a lot of others of it. And as a game, to play it, it's not really that simple. Actually, it takes a lot to play these sort of games and to interact with the other people who play them. For example, there was a 2008 study that looked at World of Warcraft users and examined how they talk on forums. And it concluded that they generally act with what they called a scientific habit of mind, in that they're not just calling each other rude words, but actually they're realizing that there's a world out there and they want to understand it. So by sharing and experimentation, collectively, they figure out the rules of that world and how they can all get on. There was another study that estimated that 52% of gamers think about democracy and governance and issues like that while they're playing games. So we can't just ignore this world, because these games are going to be created and they're going to address this. So ultimately, we arrive at the point, I think, whereby the future leaders may not come out of debating societies in universities. They may not emerge from student politics, single-issue politics. The next generation of leaders may come from YouTube, as we talked about, but they may also be guild leaders in World of Warcraft. They may come from the Council of Stellar Management. They may come from one of the other online clans, where they learn the cut and thrust of politics and of compromise and of dealing with people in gaming worlds and then apply that to the real world. So I think it's incumbent on us as gamers to be listened to, and I also think it's incumbent on those of us who make video games to make sure that we encode real-world values with meaning that make our games something more than just fun. Thank you.